We're going to learn today one of the most obvious questions, probably, in the whole story of the construction of the ark. Honestly, it's got to be one of the most obvious questions. So where we're starting, Parashas Noach, obviously, it is Perek Vav, chapter 6, Pasuk Tes Zayin, Pasuk 16. Chapter 6, Pasuk 16. So basically what's happening over here is that the Torah describes how they how Noach built the ark, the Teva, and we're going to see the things that Hashem told him to do. So what does Hashem tell him? I'm just going back a little bit. You should make a Teva out of this particular kind of wood, this goifer wood, and you should cover it with koifer, which is, I guess, a kind of tar that you cover it in order to waterproof it, and it should be these sizes: 300 amos long, which is approximately 150 meters, I guess, and 50 amos wide, and 30 amos high, and it should be divided. And then we come to this pasuk: Tzoyhar ta'ase la teva, that you should make for the teva, you should make a tzoyhar. Now, we don't really know what a tzoyhar is. So in order to work out what a tzoyhar is, we've got to look in Rashi. What does Rashi tell us is this tzoyhar? So it's the first Rashi on the pasuk, Tezayim, tzoyhar. Says Rashi, what is the definition of tzoyhar? Yesh oimrim chaloin. Some people will tell you that it means a window. Veyesh oimrim even toiva hameira lohem. And others will tell you that it is a precious stone that would give light, that would illuminate inside the Teva. One thing that is clear from Rashi is that Rashi obviously appreciates that the word tzoyhar is somehow related to light. You have to say that, right? Somehow it's related to light. And the question is, why? What's so obvious that it relates to light? So if you look at the word tzoyhar, straight away you can see an association with the word Tzoharayim. Tzoharayim, of course, meaning the noon, the midday. Tzoharayim. So Tzoyhar, which is obviously a singular version of that word, would be just like Tzoharayim, noon is a time of brightness. So Tzoyhar is something that must shed light. The question is, what is this thing that sheds light? Is the thing that sheds light a window that allows the light in from the outside? Or is the thing that sheds light an even tova, some kind of a glowing stone that creates light from the inside? So that's effectively what Rashi is saying. There are two different views and opinions. Now, we're going to look at a few questions, 4 questions specifically on this Rashi. However, the first 2 questions are almost like a question with an A and B. And this has, as I said in the beginning, it's got to be the most obvious question about the construction of the ark. Either way you look at it, this tzoyhar is said in the singular. So whatever it is, there's only one of them. According to Rashi, either it is chaloin, one window, or it is even tova, one stone. So the most obvious question is, if you've got a vessel that is 300 amos long, 300 amos long, how is one window or one stone going to illuminate the entire thing? I'm sure everybody knows this from their sukkah, right? It's very uncommon for a person to have enough light inside a sukkah. Doesn't matter how big or small your sukkah is, very few people get the lighting right. So there's always parts of the sukkah that are a little bit dark because you've got your 1 or 2 lights in the middle and then the sides are not illuminated properly. Now your sukkah is definitely not 300 amos long. One window, one even tova, how on earth is it going to light the whole thing? Part B of that question is, that would be a good question if the entire ark was open plan and one level. But now that we know that Rashi tells us the structure of the ark was medurim, different compartments, and we know that the Torah says it was tachtim shenim ushelishim ta'aseha, that it was 3 different levels, then the question is even greater. How will one window or one stone help to illuminate all these different compartments on 3 different levels. So it's an obvious question, and it's a great question, and we need to understand it. Then we have technical questions on Rashi. The technical questions are that we already know, and we've established this many times through the course of learning Rashi. So we already know that if Rashi offers 2 explanations on the same topic, it's because each one of the explanations has some question associated with it, and that question leaves us thinking this is not a good enough explanation, therefore we have to lean on the other explanation. Usually what Rashi does always is the first explanation is the one that is most satisfying to the pshat, to the simple understanding, but it has an issue which forces us to bring a second explanation. The second explanation is usually a weaker explanation, but at least it tackles whatever the question was on the first explanation. So we've got to now analyze the two. Why is the window closer to the pshat, and yet what is missing in the window explanation that then leads us to the stone explanation that will somehow resolve it, although it's not closer to the pshat? So that's what we have to ask. Also, you have to consider this. Any time that you have multiple commentaries on a particular pasuk, you always have to consider this. If this one is not a full explanation, and this one is not a full explanation, maybe there's a third explanation that satisfies all of those issues. And if that third explanation does exist, we should quote it in Rashi. So Rashi has taken the perspective that Tzohar is related to the word Tzoharayim, which means the illumination of the daytime. And therefore he said it's either a window that illuminates or it's a stone that illuminates. However, if you look at one of the other commentaries called the Chizkuni, Chizkuni says the word Tzohar comes from the word Yitzhar. Yitzhar is olive oil. Ah, what a brilliant explanation. Tzohar ta'aseh lateva means that what you should do is you should take into the ark enough supply of olive oil to be able to illuminate using candles or lamps or torches or whatever it is that you're going to use. Now that's a brilliant explanation, and of course it immediately tackles the technical problem of not having enough light, because if you have enough oil, you can have lamps all over the place and you can illuminate the place well enough. Why doesn't Rashi go with that explanation? It's such a good, satisfactory explanation, surely. Okay, so those are our questions on Rashi. Before we address those questions, we're going to look at another issue which relates to this as well, and in order to do that, we've got to skip ahead to chapter 8. And chapter 8, Pasuk 22. Chapter 8, Pasuk 22, this is after they've already exited from the ark, and Noach has brought a korban, a sacrifice to give gratitude to Hashem, and Hashem promises him, I'll never flood the world again, and he gives the rainbow as the sign. So look at Pasuk Chof Beis, Pasuk 22. Oid kol yemei haaretz, this is Hashem's undertaking for the future of the rest of the history of earth. Zera, v'kotzir, v'koir, v'choim, v'kayitz, v'choiref, v'yoim, v'layla, loy yishboisu. All the natural systems of seasons, of heat and cold, of day and night will never be suspended again. You hear that? They'll never be suspended again. Okay, so let's see what Rashi says on those words. So the Rashi is on the words, V'yoim v'layla lo yishboisu, that they'll never be suspended again. Look what Rashi says. Michlal, from here we can derive, Sheshovsu kol yemois hamabul. From here we can derive that all of the systems of nature were suspended during the period of the flood. So the seasons were suspended and day and night were suspended, because that's one of the things that Hashem says is now going to be guaranteed going forward. Continue reading. Shaloi shimshu hamazolois. Rashi says it clearly. The different astronomical beings did not serve their purpose. Veloi nikar bein yoim uvein laila. And so one of the direct results was that during the course of the flood, it was impossible to distinguish between day and night. Okay, you got that? So Rashi is clearly of the view that there was no daytime and nighttime. There was no distinction between daytime and nighttime during the flood. So now that raises a question. Rashi's first explanation was chaloin, that the source of light was a window. What's the use of a window if there's no distinction between day and night? Where did the light come from? Because the implication is that it was a dark world for that period. It's clearly not implying that the world was bright and shiny through the flood. If anything, the implication is that the world was dark during the flood. So if the world is dark, what does it help to have a window on your ark? Okay? So that's a question that Dafka is addressed to the view that says that Tzoyar is a window. Now, some of the commentaries on Rashi try to explain that what this means is that the normal circuits of day and night stopped, but the world was not completely dark. That's one of the explanations that's given, right? The world wasn't completely dark. Well, it could be one of the explanations, but it's not what Rashi said. Rashi said clearly, Loi nikar bein yoim uvein laila, that you could not distinguish between day and night. That implies that it was one long dark period. And if it was one long dark period, what does the window help? So others come along and they explain, well, really what it means is not for the whole, I'm saying commentaries on Rashi, doesn't mean that it was for the whole period that they were in the ark that there was no light. It only means the period when it rained, which is 40 days and nights. So for 40 days and nights, that's when there was no sun and there was no light. And after the 40 days and nights, for the remainder of the time that they spent in the ark, there was light as well. That's how some of the commentaries try to explain it. The problem then is, so how did they see anything for those 40 days and nights? You have to still be able to see what's going on inside the ark during the 40 days and nights, right? Surely, for very obvious logical reasons. So we're back to square one. According to the opinion that says that the source of light in the ark was a window, how did that window work if at least for some of the period of the flood, there wasn't light to come through the window? Okay, so those are our questions. Of course, the most compelling question of the lot is, how do you illuminate such a large vessel with such a small amount of light? Usually what happens with these things is that the answer hinges on something that's actually quite obvious. What is quite obvious in this story? If you go back, Tzoyar Ta'aseh Lateva, if you go back, those few psukim describe what Hashem tells Noach that he has to do when building the ark. So let's go back and let's have a look. Let's read it. Let's read them all. Okay, we'll go right back to Pasuk. Let's go to Pasuk Yud Daled, because that's really Pasuk. So we're back in chapter 6, Pasuk 14. Let's go have a look over there and see what did Hashem tell him, and let's see if we can then construct what Hashem didn't tell him. Okay, let's have a look. Asei lecha tevas atzei goifer. Make for yourself a teva, a vessel out of this goifer wood. Okay, we get that. We understand that obviously if Hashem had not told Noach to make the ark, he would never have made the ark. Fine. What kind of an ark should it be? Kinim ta'aseh sateva. It should have all these compartments inside of it. So there was no guarantee that it had to be that design. Hashem specifies it needs to have compartments. Perfect. And Hashem advises him to put tar on the inside and the outside in order to protect it, in order to waterproof it. Which, by the way, means that all of the pictures that everybody ever paints of the ark, it always looks like it's wood on the outside. That's clearly against the pshat. Anyhow, subject for another conversation. Then Hashem tells him, this is what you should make it, the following dimensions. 300 amos long, 50 amos wide, 30 amos high. Then he tells him, Tzoyar ta'aseh lateva, you should make this tzoyar. Vel amo techalenu milmailo, it should reach a top which is only 1 amma wide, so it should have a pitched roof, and the top should be an amma wide. Ufesach hateva betzida tasim, you should make the door into the ark on the side. Tachtiyim, shenim, ushelishim ta'aseha, and then you should make it with 3 levels. 3 levels. Okay, so those are the things that Hashem told Noach to do. Did he tell Noach to take food? Doesn't say anywhere over here that you should take food. He says, he does. He says, he does. It says take the animals and he says take food. Perfect. Does he tell him that you should put a cover over the ark? Doesn't tell him that, right? Yet, if you skip ahead again to chapter 8, back exactly where we were before, if you go back to chapter 8 and you go to Pasuk, where is it? Pasuk Yud Gimel, Pasuk 13. What does it say over there? Vayosar Noach es michsei hateva. Noach removed the cover from the ark. What cover? Where did Hashem tell him that he should put a cover over the ark? Well, we do know that he said he should coat the ark in tar, but that's not the cover that he's talking about over here. So there was obviously some kind of a cover over the ark. Noach has it on the ark, and Hashem didn't tell him to do it. There's one example. Or, according to the opinion that says that he used a stone to illuminate the ark, we know that he opened a window to let the birds out. First the raven and then the dove. So according to the version that he illuminated the ark using a stone, where did Hashem tell him to make a window? In other words, the point that we need to make over here is that the Torah does not record every single detail of the construction of this ark. It tells us the specific things that Hashem instructed Noach. There were other things that Noach needed to do of his own initiative. So it tells us that you had to build compartments. Does it say that you had to put inside the human living space beds? No. Does it say that you had to put cupboards, I don't know, whatever they needed to keep the food? No, it doesn't say these things. Because there are certain things that should be logical, that Noach should have worked out on his own, that you've got to have some kind of a cover over the ark. For whatever reason, he worked it out on his own. And the fact that he had to have places for his family to sleep, he worked that out on his own. The things that Hashem tells him are the things he would not have known to do. So, we can assume that he knew of his own accord that he had to take something into the ark in order to have light, because he knew that part of his job was going to be to feed the animals. How do you feed the animals if there's no light? If you can't see what you're doing. So he knew that he had to illuminate the ark in whichever way he did it, and it's actually irrelevant to the story how he did it. If he used oil or if he used some other kind of a substance, it's actually irrelevant to us. When the Torah tells us that Hashem instructed Noach, Tzoyhar ta'aseh lateva, we now appreciate that this means in addition to the illumination system that you, Noach, have chosen to use in the ark, in addition to that, Hashem gives a specific, clear instruction for a particular kind of tzoyhar that has to be added for additional light. And so we have to ask ourselves, well, what is the purpose of this additional light? That's what we've got to ask ourselves, because it's absolutely clear, logically, a thinking person who's planning to save the world would probably have included a process to be able to light up the environment he's working in. So the question is, what is this tzoyhar for? The most obvious answer is, it's a chaloin. It's a window. That means to say, yes, it is designed to produce light, but it is also designed for other things. It could be used for ventilation. So once the rain stops, you could open that window and you could have fresh air come into the ark. It could be that at some point in time, Noach will need to know whether the land has become inhabitable again or not. So he's going to have to send out some kind of scouts, as he did, first the raven, then the doves. So he needs a way to get them out. So logically, the first explanation, the one that seems to be closest to the pshat, is to say tzoyhar means a window. By the way, that also fits perfectly with the language. Tzoyhar ta'aseh, it's something you have to make. A window is something you would make in the ark. A stone is not something you would make. If actually the word was supposed to be stone, then surely it should have said, bring the tzoyhar, instead of make the tzoyhar. So for these reasons, Rashi first wants to suggest that it means a window. It's the one that's the smoothest in the language and the one that makes the most sense because it has multiple purposes. However, why is Rashi dissatisfied with just saying it's a window? Why? Well, number one, because why then doesn't the Torah say window? Later on it's going to say, right? It's going to talk about windows. It's a common word. It's something that the Torah uses. Why are we shying away from the word right now and saying tzoyhar? That's question number one. Question number two, if the purpose of the window is to add light, so you've already got light, and by the way, that's why he doesn't speak about the Chizkuni's suggestion, because as far as Rashi is concerned, the idea of taking oil and lamps on board was self-evident. So you don't need a pshat to teach us this. But if the window is designed to add extra light, how much extra light is it already going to add for one little area where that window happens to be, firstly? And secondly, how's it going to work? Because Rashi does believe that there's this period of darkness, whether it's the whole flood or just the 40 days, either way there's a period of darkness. So the chaloin fits nicely with the language of ta'aseh, something that you should do, and it will make, and it fits nicely with the concept of having multiple purposes, but it doesn't fit nicely with the concept of bringing light because it doesn't seem to bring too much light. Whereas the precious stone, well, that's something that's mobile. So you could carry it around to different parts of the ark as you need it. Plus, it's not affected by the outside climate. So if outside is pitch black, it doesn't make a difference. If I've got a glowing stone, the glowing stone is still going to work even when it's dark outside. So that's why we'd prefer the second option to come into the picture at this point in time. Because even though the word chaloin, window, works on multiple levels, it leaves us with a few questions that the precious stone will tackle. The problem with the precious stone is, as we said, the word ta'aseh. It sounds like it's something you have to construct. And a stone is not something that you construct. A stone is something that already has this particular property to it, and therefore it doesn't fit so nicely with the words. There's another thing to consider as well. And that is, if you have a look at Rashi throughout the story of the construction of the ark, he justifies each instruction. Why does it have to be a slanted roof? Why does it have to be covered with tar? Why does it have to have different compartments? Why does it have to have different levels? Each thing Rashi explains that it had a purpose. Different levels, so you can have the humans at the top and the animals in the middle and the refuse at the bottom. Different compartments, obviously, so things don't attack each other. Why do you cover it? So it should be waterproof. Coat it. Why do you coat it? So it should be waterproof. So Rashi's approach is that every single one of the instructions that Hashem gives has a purpose over and above what seems to be obvious. Now, if you say window, as we've already described, the window has multiple purposes. Not only is it good for light, it's also good for ventilation, it's also good for sending out the birds later. Whereas, if you're talking about a precious stone, well, why do you need a precious stone? Just use a lamp. There's no other value to it. In other words, if it's to add light, so say, put more candles, put more lamps. Why do we need to have dafka, the concept of a stone? By the way, here's another interesting point, very interesting point. We know that right at the beginning, Hashem indicated that this devastation of the flood was going to be very, very hectic. Hineni mashchisam, I'm going to destroy everything. And it's probable that Noach understood that destroying everything also included destroying the cycles of nature. The cycles of nature for that period of time, that there wouldn't be seasons, and there wouldn't be day and night, and there wouldn't be the normal regulation of temperature. And then Hashem tells him, make a window. That's like a silver lining. Because one of the things that we know is that although Hashem said, Hineni mashchisam, it's going to be absolute devastation, we also know that Hashem wanted to soften it as much as possible. So even in the beginning, he only sent a light rain in the hope that that would wake people up and they'd actually do teshuvah. So in a similar vein, Hashem softened it and said, make a window anyway. Because in the beginning, maybe it will be so hectic, but then it's going to soften over the course of time. And you'll actually be able to open that window and you'll be able to get some light in or whatever the case is. So the window, in all respects, actually seems to be the stronger commentary. It seems to be the one that aligns most with the theme and the wording of the story. It's got the little weakness of, well, how much light is it going to give anyway, which is why he was prompted, and the fact that it doesn't use the word chaloin, which is why Rashi was prompted to say, well, there's an alternative. It could also mean a precious stone. Okay, so it's interesting. It's interesting that what appeared to be such a fundamental question about the construction of the ark actually is not such a fundamental question after all, because this tzoyhar is over and above what was practically needed in order to make the space livable. What could it teach us? What could it teach us? And maybe you could say that this is the most beautiful part of the Sikha, because it's a fairly straightforward question-answer process, but the spiritual lesson is absolutely beautiful. And the lesson is this. We clearly see that Hashem gave an instruction to Noach to add light in an environment that is not naturally light. So yes, that of course is talking about the ark, and the ark was a dark, dank environment because of its nature and its structure, but the lesson is about our world. Our world is a place that is not naturally light. And our goal as people, as Jewish people, is to introduce light into the world that is not naturally light. So there are two ways to do this. Imagine you're in this sealed environment, because that's what the ark was. It was a completely sealed environment. So you're inside your sealed environment, and inside your sealed environment, it's absolutely dark. That doesn't mean it's dark outside. You know, if a person's ever gone, for example, into a room with blackout curtains, or you go into a cinema, when you walk out afterwards and you see it's daytime, you're kind of surprised, hey, but it was so dark in this room, how come it's light outside? So you're in this dark environment, and it might come as a surprise that actually the world is light, you're just not seeing it. So what do you have to do? You have to create something in the barrier to let the light in. You're not creating light, you allow the light in. That's the symbolism of this window. The first stage of a person's spiritual development is to create a window that allows the godly light that already exists in the world to flow into where I live in this world. So a good example of that would be, there's a saying from the Rabbi that a business person sees hashgacha pratis, sees divine presence, the divine providence in their lives even more than a person who sits in a yeshiva all day. Why? Because the person who sits in yeshiva all day, he's learning about Hashem. The person who's out in the business world gets gobsmacked. I can't believe how this connection happened and how that thing came together and whatever. So you recognize Hashem's hand in your life perhaps even more than a person who's in yeshiva. That's a window to allow the light of godliness in. That's phase 1 of spiritual growth and development. Phase 2 is Even Toiva. Phase 2 is a beautiful glowing stone, which is a fascinating concept because an Even, a stone, is one of the least spiritual things that could possibly exist. You know, we talk about a hierarchy of life. So there's those things which are the pinnacle of life, humans, medaber. Then you have things which are alive and they can reproduce and they can move and they can construct and whatever. Animals, chai. Then you have those that can grow and propagate, so meach, plants. And then you have doimim, the things that cannot grow, they cannot propagate. The only thing that ever happens to them is they erode, and that's the mineral world. So Even is the symbol of the mineral world, the most gashmi, the most material, the most limited thing that exists. And for that reason, it's a great symbol for the materialism of this world. What's the goal of a Jewish person? Not only to allow godly light into my life. So here I am in my business, and I recognize that Hashem helped me to make that deal or to find that contact. But more than that, that I see the physical itself as an opportunity and potential to share light. I see the business itself as an opportunity to bring godliness into the world. I see the food that I eat as an opportunity to bring godly energy into my body. How? Okay, by doing business differently. That it's not just about earning a buck, but it's about creating goodness in the world. And if I engage with another Jewish person in the business practice, then we're going to learn Torah together or do a mitzvah together. And the reason I earn money is to be able to give tzedakah. And the environment that I live in follows the rules of the Torah. So I cause the even to glow, the stone to shine. And that's actually what Rashi is indicating over here, more than anything else. Is that you might live in a world that is tumultuous. You might live in a world where everybody around us is completely immoral and has lost their way, and it's a terrible place and things are being destroyed. And I can create an environment within which not only do I allow God in, but I turn the world around to become a source of light itself. And that is the purpose and the goal and the objective of being Jewish.